By the time the city auditor cut the ceremonial ribbon on my ex-boss's seized McMansion, the marching band from Jefferson High was already playing a triumphant medley in the cul-de-sac. The neighbors whistled, the local news anchor held a microphone like it was the Olympic torch, and I stood under a borrowed pop-up tent, handing out lemonade that tasted suspiciously like justice. There was a faint smell of charcoal from a dozen backyard grills, and the HOA president, stern as a federal judge, read the list of violations discovered in the home office that used to be my boss's private empire. Falsified vendor invoices, ghost employees with names ripped straight off a diner menu, and a secret slush fund labeled Leadership Wellness. I did not clap. I only watched as a convertible rolled up, white as a dentist's tooth, and out stepped my cheating wife in oversized sunglasses, followed by the boss who used to sign my performance reviews with the warmth of a tax audit. She looked like a commercial for a future that had forgotten my name. He looked like a motivational speaker who had invented the word synergy and planned to sue anyone who used it. They never expected a block party would double as a public reckoning. They never expected the barbecue smoke to mingle with subpoenas. They never expected my revenge to taste like hot dogs and cold justice. The plan had taken months, and it had been stitched together with threads that did not look like threads at all. A Little League sponsorship that turned into a pattern of disappearing checks. An employee wellness seminar filmed for the company intranet that, by a miracle of misfiled metadata, ended up on a playlist titled Holiday Party 2019. A whistleblower hotline that rang in the empty office of a man who did not exist except on a payroll report. I had tied the knots while the neighborhood jogged past me in neon shoes, while the mail carrier left thick envelopes that said important in a font that begged you to look away, while my family photograph sat face down on the nightstand of a house that did not echo my name anymore. Revenge, I had discovered, is patient. It likes spreadsheets and sunshine. It likes community theater and city council meetings. It likes when your enemies show up to their own celebration, believing the world is still a buffet where their plate is always full. "Is this some kind of joke?" my ex-boss asked the auditor as the band slid into a brass-heavy rendition of a patriotic standard. He wore a blazer the color of confidence and a smile that had never met consequences. My cheating wife took off her sunglasses slowly, like a magician revealing she had nothing to hide. She held his arm with the theatrical tenderness of an actress in a perfume ad. She looked past me, then through me, then around me, finally pretending not to see me at all. I did not flinch. The anchor cleared her throat. The cameraman zoomed. A flock of curious suburban kids gathered like jurors, half eating popsicles, half sensing that the adults had arrived at a chapter of the story that could not be summarized on a refrigerator magnet. "Ladies and gentlemen," the auditor announced into a portable PA system the HOA had purchased for the 4th of July picnic, "this property is the subject of ongoing proceedings related to financial misconduct and payroll irregularities. Public records will reflect the specifics. Today's notice is a matter of transparency." The crowd applauded on cue, because transparency is a value we love when it is about someone else. The anchor tried to get my ex-boss to comment. He whispered to my cheating wife, and then spoke to the camera in that performative baritone he used to save for shareholder calls. "This is a misunderstanding," he declared. "We prioritize family, community, and integrity." The band, either inspired or wicked, struck up the Star-Spangled Banner, and in that awkward moment everyone reached for their heart like they were checking for a missing wallet. I could tell you the whole story from that beat, from the shiny hood of the convertible reflecting a sky that looked mercilessly clean, from the way my cheating wife shifted her weight, 2 inches in heels, the subtle geometry of a person who believes the ground is still hers to command. But the truth of this conspiracy parody fairy tale did not begin with the ribbon or the band or the HOA president who had once fined me for a trash can lid not fully closed. It began earlier, and it began later. It began when I believed that devotion could be itemized, that marriage could be reconciled like a ledger if the numbers just balanced. And it began when the infidelity finally flipped a switch in my head that said, trust what you see, not what you are being sold. For now, keep the picture. The convertible door stuck for a second, the anchor trying not to sweat under television makeup, the auditor reading statutory language while a teenager in a mascot costume danced behind him because the cheer squad had promised entertainment. Keep the picture and then reverse it, the way a movie reels backward to show you the trick. Watch the ribbon coil back onto the giant scissors. Watch the lemonade rise from the cups back into the pitcher. Watch my cheating wife slip her sunglasses back on and drive away like a ghost in reverse. Now that you have the finale where the couple who ran away writes their names on the wind, let us travel backward into the middle where my obsession matured into craft, and further backward into the beginning where I still believed this was a story about losing a woman, and not, as it turned out, a story about unmasking a small-town empire dressed like a company. My revenge did not start with anger, and it did not end with ash. It started with a neighborhood app full of raccoon alerts and suspicious sedans. And it ended with a public records request that read like the first page of a thriller you did not know you had been reading for years. I was not looking for them when I found the truth. I was looking for myself, for my family's name in a place where it had been erased, and I found a map no one had meant me to see. The first time I suspected anything, it was not perfume or lipstick on a to-go cup, or even the late nights packaged as career hustle. It was the way the house fell silent when the doorbell camera pinged on my phone at 2 a.m. and showed my cheating wife standing in our driveway, talking on speakerphone to a car that did not belong to anyone on our block. The car's interior glowed that bluish corporate hue you see in airports and financial firm commercials, and a male voice spoke in the smooth cadence of a man who does not ask, he authorizes. The leadership retreat will be transformational, he said. We will detox from small thinking. I lay on the couch, the television still murmuring a documentary about the Hoover Dam, and felt something inside me tilt. She was saying yes to the retreat. I was saying no to the version of our life that needed marketing copy to make intimacy sound ambitious. For weeks after that, the house filled with brochures layered in euphemisms, culture alignment, wellness synergy, executive mindfulness, next-level family values. I worked as a data analyst in a beige industrial park where optimism went to be formatted, so I recognized jargon when I saw it. But this was something else. The company where my wife and my boss worked had always sold itself as a warm American enterprise. Chili cook-offs, summer Fridays, a baseball suite for the staff at the minor league stadium. They put family in the mission statement because no one ever argues with family. And they put community in the slide deck next to a photo of a scout troop saluting a flag so huge it could shade a parade. They were very proud of their holiday charity drive. They were extremely proud of their annual conference at a desert resort where the sunsets looked photoshopped even in person. I had attended once as a spouse and had been encouraged to clap for people who landed new accounts as if they had returned home from a successful voyage on the Santa Maria. I had clapped. I had felt for a long time that clapping was a civic duty. Then my cheating wife's hours stretched thin and snapped. The explanations were smooth at first. A project round the clock, a client global, a deadline brutal, a team in crisis. I know the grammar of modern infidelity looks identical to the grammar of modern work, and perhaps that is the joke the century is telling. She started coming home with jargon in her eyes. She started saying things like, Graham believes couples must choose growth or decay. There is no middle. And I would ask who Graham was, and she would say the name as if it were a password. The boss, the visionary, the man who had turned a second-tier regional firm into a national player. He had the haircut of a senator and the wrists of a tennis coach. He sent the staff inspirational quotes at dawn and tethered them to his thunder at dusk. He once told a room full of salespeople that fear is a ladder, and then sold them a subscription to the latter. The retreat happened in a place where the sand looked designed. I did not go. She texted photos with desert light and beautiful people squinting into the future. There was a bonfire. There was a workshop about radical candor and how secrets poison a family. I replied with a thumbs up I did not mean and turned back to the spreadsheet that had become my confessional. The numbers told a story about purchases at odd hours. They told a story about duplicate charges for the same boutique hotel. They told a story about an expense report coded community outreach that cost more than a used truck. This was not curiosity anymore. This was a conspiracy in khakis. The night she did not come home and then did not answer, I sat at the kitchen table and poured coffee as if daylight could be negotiated. At 4 a.m, I opened the Nextdoor app and scrolled past raccoon warnings and calls for a neighborhood yard sale until I saw a post about a convertible idling near the park after midnight. The photo was blurry, but the confidence was clear. When she returned, she said words like honesty and transparency, and we owe it to our family to tell the truth. She said she had fallen in love, and she said it in a voice like a podcast host reading sponsored content. She said the marriage had been a cage. She promised that this was not betrayal, but transformation, and she repeated family again and again, because if you put the word family in a sentence enough times, it can sound like grace. I did not break anything. I did not shout. I asked whether Graham was good to her, and my mouth shaped the syllables like I was ordering a pizza I did not want to eat. She said yes. She said she was moving out that day. She had a suitcase already in the trunk of the convertible, which meant I had been written out of a script in which I thought I was the co-author. She left a note about logistics, the mortgage, her grandmother's quilt, the dog. The dog chose me because the dog did not attend leadership retreats. What I am telling you is that grief can feel like a bad audio track. Words you know by heart do not sync to the picture. I went to work. I sat in meetings where grown adults argued about color-coded charts and the future of a product line that would be obsolete by Christmas. I filled the silence at home by running. I ran past yard signs and school carpool lines and a billboard for the company where Graham smiled down like a regional deity. He promised integrity, innovation, and community in a font that cost more than my first car. I made a pot roast because that is what television taught me to do when a family is in trouble. I watched the dog watch me. At 2 a.m, boredom curdled into curiosity. I filed a small, unremarkable public records request related to the city's business incentive grants. If you live long enough in this country, you'll learn how to fill out forms just by looking at them sideways. Some days later, a PDF arrived in my inbox, like a love letter from reality. It contained minutes, approvals, and vendor names that tripped alarms in my head. One vendor had an address that belonged to a UPS store. Another had a website that was 5 pages of lorem ipsum text and a photo of a smiling stock family with a golden retriever. I showed the dog the laptop and told him we were onto something, and he wagged like a maniac because verbs are his hobby. Infidelity is dirty work, but white-collar schemes are hygienic. They wear ties, they serve crudités, they sponsor youth sports teams and then use the receipts to claim tax credits. I started cross-referencing the vendors with employee LinkedIn pages and noticed that half the consultants had last names that matched junior employees in Graham's office. I charted cash flows like a detective in a police procedural. The walls of my home office, once modest and empty, grew cluttered with printouts connected by red string that I bought at a craft store where the cashier called me Han and asked if I was doing a school project. Something like that, I said. Revenge was not the plan then. Revenge was a season, and the season had just started to change. I was not trying to hurt anyone. I was trying to find where my life had gone when I was not looking. I was trying to figure out why the word family kept showing up in the documentation for things that did not look like family at all. Once you accept that the world is a stage and your boss is an amateur magician who uses PowerPoint as smoke, you begin to see the trapdoors. The trick was not the affair. Affairs are ancient. The trick was the way Graham dressed the affair in corporate language and civic respectability, as if infidelity could be a leadership competency. I built a plan, not like a soldier, but like a stage manager. I started where all American dramas begin, with a committee. The Chamber of Commerce had a volunteer technology subcommittee that maintained the town's business directory, and I joined it with a smile that said I liked helping. On the softball field, I coached third base and learned which parents worked at which firms. At church, I poured coffee, because coffee is how you meet the treasurer. I auditioned for the community theater's spring musical and did not get a part, but I met a young reporter who dreamed of breaking a story that did not involve bake sales. I let the universe braid itself until the rope felt sturdy. Operation Potluck is what I called it in my notes, because every player would bring a dish. The dog was my only audience, and he approved. I filed more public requests, but always small and polite, like I was asking the city clerk to pass the salt. I learned that the wellness seminar vendor received payments on days when city offices were closed. I learned that a grant award had been amended with handwritten notes that did not match any staff member's handwriting. I learned that a shell company had a P.O. box next to the UPS store where the clerk gave me a receipt for a roll of tape and quietly said, "We see a lot of interesting mail here." It is amazing how much conspiracy work is just normal errands. I did not hack anything. I harvested what grew openly, fertilized by carelessness. I baked. I volunteered. I smiled. I shared a draft municipal budget with the Little League treasurer, who told me he had once been asked to invoice the company for brand visibility and then never got paid. I talked to a vendor who said he had been offered a gig if he would funnel a portion of the fee back as a consulting retainer for strategy advice that never materialized. I let the reporter assemble the pieces herself. She brought fact-checking like a weapon. I brought context like a prayer. At work, I kept my head down and perfected the art of being present but invisible, the way an expensive lamp can be switched off and still look useful. The conspiracy broadened in ridiculous ways. Graham had a side project called the Institute for Authentic Families, which was a 2-page website and a rented ballroom panel discussion where he declared that American families were under attack by mediocrity. He charged tickets. He sold T-shirts. He took photos with local pastors and school principals and anyone else who looked like a pillar. He claimed that raising a family required enterprise and courage, which is true. But he also claimed that enterprise and courage required consulting packages that suspiciously resembled public money. I started hearing whispers that his leadership retreats included vulnerability circles where employees shared secrets that later showed up in performance evaluations. That was not conspiracy. That was a management style with candles. If this were a conventional story, I would confess that I wanted to burn it down, that revenge felt like a bonfire on a cold night. But I had been alive long enough to know that fire can jump fences. I did not want my town scorched. I wanted the truth to sound dull and undeniable. The reporter put in requests of her own. The city clerk sighed, and then complied, and then began to smile a little when she saw my emails because she understood the plot, even if we never spoke it aloud. The HOA president, who had once fined my family for leaving the lawn chairs visible from the street, turned out to be a private investigator in another life. He showed me how to read a corporate filing like a poem. He had a soft spot for dogs, and the dog adored him, so he is not the villain in this. I became charming at barbecues. I brought potato salad and stories about minor league baseball. I took the long way home to pass the billboard where Graham's smile looked increasingly forced. My cheating wife began to show up at the grocery store at odd times of day, unaccompanied, sunglasses off, practicing a kind of invisibility of her own. We never spoke. She was living in a rented townhouse near the yoga studio, which is the professional athlete of new beginnings. A mutual friend told me that Graham had begun to insist that vulnerability was a currency and that the company was running a deficit. Employees cried and clapped on command. I copied the clapping rhythm into my notes because patterns matter. I do not know if she cried. I do know that she began posting inspirational quotes about resilience that sounded like the captions of a woman who had discovered the cost of a convertible is more than the financing. When the reporter was ready, she pitched her editor a series. The series needed a hook, and the hook needed a moment, and the moment needed an event with balloons. The city auditor's office was conducting a public outreach tour, which is something that exists because democracy is weirder than fiction. They agreed to make a stop on our block as a case study for transparency in local business partnerships. The Chamber of Commerce, bless their optimism, organized a family fun day to coincide with the marching band and the lemonade and a bouncy house that was an alarming metaphor for the economy. Graham RSVP'd because he could not resist a camera. He believed cameras were mirrors that could be bribed. The week before the event, the reporter posted a teaser, "When family values are a line item." The comments lit up with the predictable chorus. Haters, defenders, people who believed any criticism of a successful man was envy disguised as ethics. I did not engage. I walked the dog. I checked my checklist. I put fresh batteries in the doorbell camera. The HOA president sent me a text that simply read, "Bring cups." I slept as if sleep were a vow. On the morning of the party, the sky was so blue you would have thought it had nothing to hide. My hands did not shake when I set out the cups. I had already spent my trembling in the nights when I tried to figure out how to forgive a cheating wife, and discovered that forgiveness is not amnesia, and that infidelity does not exempt you from gravity. Revenge for me was not payback. It was alignment. It was the silly audacity of making a farce into a ledger that could finally balance. When the convertible door finally stuck at the party and Graham had to tug it twice, the crowd laughed in that low, collective way that suburban crowds laugh when they smell narrative. The auditor read the findings in plain English. The reporter asked short, rude questions the way a good reporter does. The marching band played a song that made the middle school kids feel brave. My cheating wife stood behind Graham like a weather event, eyes glassy, cheeks set in that Hollywood shape of composure that fools the back row but not the front. She did not look in at me. I did not look away. I felt a strange calm, the kind that comes when you have done the work and the oven timer dings, and now the pie either sets or it does not. Graham tried to spin it. He invoked family, community, innovation. He said the Institute for Authentic Families was a pilot program. He said the vendors were vetted. He said leadership requires hard choices. The auditor, who had no sense of theater and therefore was the hero, explained what payroll fraud looks like with the dryness of a technical manual. The HOA president held the microphone like he was swearing in a witness, which he could have done for real in another era. The chamber, poor souls, stood with their branded polo shirts and whispered about contingency plans. It was both farce and civics, both parody and the dullest kind of justice. The kids asked if the bouncy house was still on. The answer was yes, because you do not punish children for adult plots. My cheating wife finally spoke when a neighbor asked if she was all right. She said she was fine with the brittle brightness of a person escaping a burning building while commenting on the paint. She said this was all small-minded gossip. She said the reporter had an agenda. She said the numbers were out of context. She said she would tell her side when she was ready, which is a fine sentence if you have a side that will not collapse under the weight of context. She added for the camera that she came from a family that taught hard work and loyalty, and the word family sounded strange leaving her mouth, as if it had sprouted thorns on the way. I remembered the note on our kitchen table, the way she wrote about transparency as if it were a vacation package. I remembered the first dinner date, where she said she loved the way I noticed things, and then I remembered all the things I noticed that she wished I had not. Revenge, if you are still listening to this conspiracy meets fable, was never a flaming sword. It was a mirror with good lighting. After the auditor finished, after the reporter asked one last question about shell companies with festive names, I stepped to the small makeshift stage and did the only theatrical thing I had planned. I showed a short video titled Community Investments Explained. It was a montage, legally sourced and publicly available, of invoices that looped back to mailboxes, of grants amended in pen, of wellness seminars at a resort where the fire pit glowed like a vow. I did not narrate. I let the captions do the talking. I let the music be middle school band earnest. It was not a takedown. It was a PTA meeting with better production values. When it ended, there was a silence that felt like a country road at midnight. Then someone clapped, not out of hatred, but out of relief that the ridiculous had finally been described accurately. In the days that followed, the consequences arrived, not as fireworks, but as envelopes. The company board placed Graham on leave. The Institute website went down for maintenance and never came back. The grant-making body opened a review. A few former employees wrote me notes that said variations of thank you without saying why, because saying why is hard when you still want another job. The convertible appeared less frequently. My cheating wife posted a photo of a sunrise with a caption about growth. Someone sent me the link and I did not click. There was a rumor that she wanted to talk. There was another rumor that she had found a new city to reinvent herself in, because America is generous that way. Both rumors might have been true, and neither changed the fact that our marriage had ended long before the first late-night call in the driveway. Infidelity had been the visible part. The rest had been paperwork, meetings, and 1,000 small self-betrayals disguised as efficient living. She did knock on my door once at dusk when the neighborhood smelled like cut grass and the dog barked like a doorbell with feelings. She looked tired in a way makeup cannot fix. She said she did not plan it this way, which is a sentence people say when they want to recover dignity they pawned. She said Graham had promised purpose and delivered drama. She said she never expected my revenge to be so civic. I almost laughed. She meant that she expected a scene, a broken window, a cruel speech. She expected a tabloid script with the volume turned up. She did not expect a spreadsheet, a committee, and a marching band. She did not expect the town to be the stage. I told her the truth. I had no interest in hurting her. I had an interest in not letting a lie run my life. She asked if I could ever forgive her. I told her forgiveness was not a permit to rebuild on the same fault line. She nodded like a person hearing a foreign language and recognizing the shape of it, but not the words. I did one theatrical thing for myself later. I rented the billboard over the Applebee's, where we used to split the 2 for $20 and argue about whether the world was getting better or worse. For a month, the billboard displayed a simple line in plain type: integrity like gravity. No logo, no accusation. People argued about it on the neighborhood app. Some said it was a church campaign. Some said it was a college doing branding. A few guessed it was about the investigation. I never confirmed anything. I drove past sometimes with the dog in the passenger seat and felt the quiet thrill of a joke that lands without laughing. If you want a moral, here is mine. Family is not a word you rescue from a brochure. It is the set of people who show up when there are no cameras and ask what you need at the store. Infidelity is not simply a romance gone wrong. It is often a symptom of a life audited and found hollow. Revenge does not have to be a sword. It can be a ledger balanced in daylight, a story told in the voice of a town that refuses to clap for magic tricks. My cheating wife ran away with her boss because he promised a narrative in which she was the hero. I became the narrator of my own life again. I did not chase her down the highway. I did not smash the convertible. I built a paper trail with the rigor of a hobby, and I followed it to the end where the marching band played, the bouncy house squeaked, and the cameras recorded a man who had mistaken applause for immunity. She never expected my revenge because she expected a duel. What she got was a chorus. And I, who once thought I had lost everything, discovered that the dull virtues, patience, accuracy, daylight, can be thrilling when you have been in the dark long enough.